Bitcoin has surged past $95,000, sparking excitement among investors. Michael Turbin, author of Bitcoin Supercycle, is super bullish on Bitcoin. He believes the cryptocurrency can hit $1 million within the next 8 to 12 years. Michael points his reasonings to investors putting more money in Bitcoin ETFs over gold and silver. The younger generation is looking to Bitcoin over gold for long-term savings and inflation hedges, and Bitcoin is viewed as the mothership of cryptocurrencies, offering a safer entry point for investors.
Like a rocket ship until the peak, and then we start falling for Bitcoin fall, and then you have a long Bitcoin winter to start all over again.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing because we often say Bitcoin winter. So you're right about the seasons. I mean, it's a pretty common term here on Wall Street when Bitcoin is pulling back, but it has had an incredible year to date, up over 100%. And I've heard, for example, Tom Lee from Fund Strat, used to be at JP Morgan, said 150,000 by the end of the year. What's driving Bitcoin higher other than the cycle that you're talking about? Because I had another guest on that said, Bitcoin is not like a stock. It doesn't have earnings and revenue and dividends, and I know it has store value, but people don't necessarily look to it as something they can count on.
They will be in the future. It's best to compare it to something like gold and silver, which also does not have dividends, but it has been used for millennia as a store of value. And Bitcoin now is just recently the value of the Bitcoin ETFs have passed in less than 1 year the value of the gold ETFs. The millennials and younger are not looking to gold for store of value, for long-term savings, for fighting inflation, for having a hedge against the dollars, money printing. They're looking at Bitcoin.
Yeah, understood. How high can Bitcoin go? I mean, I guess theoretically in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years.
Well, I have a quote in the book, I believe it's by Patrick Byrne from Overstock, who said it's not how high Bitcoin can go, it's how low the dollar can go in comparison. And, when Bitcoin first went into the news cycle in early 2013, which is around when I got involved, and it was, wow, it hit $100, then it hit $1,000. How crazy is that? There was speculation it could one day hit $1 million. I think that's now written in. I think it's not if, but when. And we will hit $1 million within the next 2 to 3 cycles. That's, I think, unquestionable.
That was going to be my question, the $1 million. So in the next 2 to 3 cycles, so that means in the next 8 or 12 years. Is that right? Is that what you mean?
That's correct. And the super cycle phenomenon is when we speed up the normal cycles, because we have 2 different phenomena going at the same time. We have had diminishing returns each cycle as it gets larger and larger in numbers. But then we also have this technology adoption life cycle that's been written about in Crossing the Chasm and around other technologies, cell phones, color TVs. When you get to a certain percentage, around maybe 8 to 10% of the population, it takes a long time to get there past the early adopters. You then have an explosion. In a decade, it all of a sudden goes to 80 or 90%. This certainly happened with automobiles. There's a famous picture of Times Square in 1903 with all horses and 1913 with all cars. That will happen with Bitcoin in the next decade or so.
All right. Look, I mean, it's amazing. And does that go, I'm sure you did so much research to put this book together. What about Ethereum, Solana, Dogecoin, etc., Coinbase, other things that have exposure to Bitcoin? Do those all go up too?
In general, they go up during the bull markets. Certainly Coinbase and MicroStrategies and ETFs that will give you 2 times the exposure have done extremely well in the last couple of weeks. But Bitcoin's a mothership. Bitcoin is, if you're first getting your exposure, that's the safest one to get into. But certainly Ethereum and Solana, Dogecoin, the top 5 to 10 coins will do quite well. And then if you want to go and really do a lot of research, it's just like saying, if you're a casual stock market investor, you pick the top 5, you go in, do the S&P, or you pick NVIDIA and Microsoft and Facebook, and Google, and set it and forget it. And that's been fine. You can set and forget Bitcoin for years, and there's never been a 5-year period where you were down. I also explain in the book how you can go and actually make a much higher return by buying once a cycle near the bottom and selling once a cycle near the top.
All right, so the winter would be when to sell, and when to buy in the winter, and you sell it maybe at the tops in the summers when it's booming and making new highs. You have one real hurdle that I understand to be true, and that is the concern about the U.S. dollar, because you said it's not really how high it goes, and quoting the guy Byrne from Overstock, you said it's more about how low the dollar goes, and the U.S. government does not want the dollar to go lower, and will keep regulation just right in the right place. It's nice to have clarity on regulation, and that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin people wanted Donald Trump to come in again, because he was providing some, sort of field tunnel vision of what could happen and some regulation. So they liked that, but they're not going to let Bitcoin overtake the dollar. I mean, stablecoin could be traded in dollars, and that'll be the reserve for that. But it's not going to, that you understand what I'm saying? They got to protect the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Sure, and it's not Bitcoin that is the threat to the U.S. dollar being the reserve currency. It's the RMB, it's the BRICS consortiums. Donald Trump, rightly, as our first Bitcoin president, sees that stablecoins are not a threat. He actually said this at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, that Tether and other stablecoins are actually great because they buy T-bills. They're some of the biggest buyers of T-bills, and then they export the dollar around the world. And in most of the world right now, people do want dollars, and they're getting it with Tether, but they're getting exposure to that and getting their growth asset because, again, Tether will just keep the dollar at its rate. And a lot of people in the global South will be looking at Bitcoin as their way of climbing out of poverty. It certainly helped them, those who got in the past. And then to spend, they then transfer it into Tether, which you can do instantly.
It's interesting that you called President-elect Donald Trump, who has been president once, the first Bitcoin president. It's interesting how you've heard him as that. Thank you. I know Bitcoin folks are pretty excited. Thank you. Great to see you. Michael Turbin and his book, Bitcoin Supercycle. Appreciate it, CEO of Transform Ventures. Thank you.